Alright, my last video I talked about bad Dragon Ball Z games. This time I'm going to be talking about good Dragon Ball Z games. So if you didn't see my previous list, please go check it out. Before I get into the list, I'm going to talk about some dishonorable mentions. Games that I forgot to mention in my bad Dragon Ball Z games list, but aren't quite as bad as the ones that made the cut. Dragon Ball Z, the collectible card game, is based on the collectible card game, of course. It's really confusing. It doesn't look very good. In all honesty, I have no idea what's even going on. I never tried playing the real life card game, so I won't say much. But this Game Boy Advance game surely didn't help. Another pretty bad one is Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi. This game doesn't even look fun. It has decent graphics, I suppose, but the combat doesn't look good. And really, the Raging Blast series and the Tenkaichi series before it was much better. And without further ado, let's get into the list. My number 10 best Dragon Ball Z game is Dragon Ball Z Attack of the Saiyans for Nintendo DS. What's so cool about this game is that it's a turn-based RPG, which is unheard of for the series. If there's another one, literally, please leave it in the comments. One that's in English. Because I'm only talking about the Dragon Ball Z games that came out in English. And not only is it a turn-based RPG, but it's pretty decent even for one. It's got really nice looking sprites. All the attacks look pretty cool with good special effects. And it's fun to play. It's the first saga of Dragon Ball Z with Raditz and Nappa and Vegeta. But you get to play as several different characters like Krillin and Yamcha and Tien for a change. And it's a lot better than the Legacy of Goku, as you saw, being in one of my worst Dragon Ball Z games. It's very good stuff. Next game on my list is Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit. Now, Burst Limit, you would hope, is Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 moved to an HD console with new stuff added. But it's kind of more like a remake of the first Budokai with the PSP's Shin Budokai gameplay. It's pretty cool, but it once again stops at the end of the Cell Saga and doesn't have the entirety of the story because of it. It tells the story in probably the best way I've ever seen. It's like Budokai, but more, I don't know what you want to call it, but more over the top. It feels more like the show. All of the actions are more, powerful looking and full of more energy. Obviously the models look better than Budokai 1 as well. That's pretty much expected on the next gen console. Unfortunately, the combat is just like the one on PSP, which means it's not as good as the one from PS2. It's a lot stiffer and there's not as much fun to be had. But overall, definitely this is a better game than the first Budokai and is more like what Budokai 1 HD should have been. That's the best thing to say about it, and I do love the way it tells the story. I wish more Dragon Ball Z games would tell the story and have the full story. I would love to see a Dragon Ball Super game that has the story just like this. That'd be awesome. The next game on my list is Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi Tag Team for PSP. I didn't want my list to be filled with the Tenkaichi games, but really, what can I do? These games are really good. And the one on PSP is actually extremely good. The graphics look great. Not just for PSP. In a lot of cases, the models look better than they did on the PS2. And it still has good voice acting and similar music. It has a very good feel to it. The only thing that's bad is the story. But it's not told very well. But, I mean, who cares about that when the gameplay is this solid and the graphics look so good? Really, there's even a way that if you have a PSP, your friend has a PSP, and then you have two more friends that each have PSPs and a copy of the game, it's basically never going to happen. But if all of those stars did align, then you probably have a really fun time ahead of you because you could play this game on ad hoc or something. I'm pretty sure. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but that sounds like a pretty fun time to me. Pretty sure that you and 3 other friends could all duke it out together, and what better way to do it? Like I said, it looks great and it sounds great. Very good time. Up next is our one and only Dragon Ball Z game for Game Boy Color. Dragon Ball Z Legendary Super Warriors. Now, this game is a card game, but it doesn't really feel much like a card game. It feels kind of more like a turn-based RPG, but it's definitely a card game. Anyways, parts of the graphics are pretty good for Game Boy Color, and parts of it look kind of like crap. But overall, this is a pretty fun game, and when I first played it, I thought, oh, this is gonna, barely go to the Frieza saga, because Game Boy games don't have much room. I was very surprised to find out it goes from Gohan being trained after Raditz all the way up until the end of Dragon Ball Z. So it was pretty impressive. It's a pretty fun combat. It's a little bit weird to get used to. It's definitely difficult. It's definitely difficult. You're gonna get your ass handed to you a lot in this game. But you can get the hang of it, and after you do, it becomes a little better. Better make sure that your deck of cards is in really good condition, though, because if you make one mistake in this game, you will pay for it. Probably lose the entire battle for one mistake. And that sounds crazy, but it's true. Overall, it's pretty good, but the music is terrible. That's because of the low quality sound on Game Boy. But even some of the Game Boy games like Pokemon have really good music, so I don't know what the excuse on this game was. On Game Boy Advance, there was a game called Dragon Ball Z Supersonic Warriors. And it was proof that a fighting game on Game Boy Advance didn't have to look ugly, it didn't have to play bad like Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu. The graphics are pretty decent. The story is somewhat original. It has some what if stories going on. It's got some good sound clips from the show, from the actors, and it's pretty decent. But a few years later on Nintendo DS, they made a sequel, and it added tons of new features. Dragon Ball Z Supersonic Warriors number 2. It's actually very fun. The music is good, the backgrounds are cool, the sprites are pretty decent, and there's a lot more to do than the one on Game Boy Advance, so it gets repetitive a lot slower. The first one gets repetitive pretty quickly, but this one I found was pretty good. Now this game's going to have some really ugly portraits for the characters, but don't let that make you think that it's a bad game. It just had a bad artist or something. I don't know. But I do recommend this one. This one's fun. I like the combat, and it feels a lot like a Dragon Ball Z Budokai game. But not exactly the same, but it feels similar to one of those games for sure. A lot of people are going to tell me that I put this game too far down on my list, but I simply don't prefer arcade fighters. But Dragon Ball Fighters, or Dragon Ball Fighter Z, however you want to pronounce it, that's up to you, is really a top-notch fighting game. And I'm not just saying that. I've played Mortal Kombat and I've played Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom, and I do like fighters more. The graphics obviously look phenomenal. I mean, every shot of the game looks like it could be a screenshot from the show, except drawn really well. Sometimes the show isn't always drawn the best. But it looks fantastic. And honestly, I wish that we'd get an entire anime that looked like the story from this game. Because the story looked exactly like the show. And honestly, the story felt a lot like the show as well. They had an original story. I really liked the concept of Android 21 and Majin 21. And I thought she was drawn real well, and she's pretty cute. A little bit annoying, but most of the Z characters are pretty annoying, so that's to be expected. But the story was told well. I didn't particularly like the whole the characters have to be controlled by you and you're possessing them. That whole thing was weird. But really, and the fighting is really good too. It has a very good feel to an arcade game. It doesn't feel real old. It feels like a modern fighting game, which it is, obviously. But honestly, this one, I don't want anyone thinking that I dislike this at all. I really love it. It's just not my kind of genre. But Arc System Works, the company that made it, absolutely nailed it. They nailed it. They hit every mark. Even the music sounds like the Budokai music, which is extremely good. Except this one doesn't sound like it's copyrighted. So, you know, points on every aspect of the music, the story, the graphics, the fighting. I could see where it would be someone's favorite Dragon Ball Z game for sure. I know that this game is going to be a sort of mixed opinion. A lot of people like this one and a lot of people don't like it. It's one of my favorites. Dragon Ball Raging Blast. It's called Dragon Ball, but it is just a Dragon Ball Z game. Now, one of my favorite parts of this game are the visuals. It looks like Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi, but all of the visuals have been way improved. And the characters look great. But before Fighters, this was the best looking Dragon Ball game, and that's my opinion, but you're not going to change my opinion on that. It looks fantastic.
You can try, but I think it's still a little early for you to become a Super Saiyan.
And gameplay wise, it plays much like the Tenkaichi games. It's a little bit more simplistic and not nearly as many characters. But I think it does pretty good for the characters that are there. Obviously, they all look great, and they sound good. And I think it's one of the last games that has the original Funimation cast. And another one of my favorite parts of this game is at certain points during the story, it recreates exact, precise moments from the show with the same camera angles. The characters are like damaged in the exact same way with their clothes. It looks like a literal recreation of the anime, and that's some of my favorite moments in this game. It was pretty fun to play through the story because of that. So once again, if we could get a game that tells the story exactly like Burst Limit, but has the recreated moments straight from this game, that would be the best. That would be great. And Raging Blast has also some what ifs, like we have Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta and Super Saiyan 3 Broly. Pretty cool. Remember when I said that Dragon Ball Z The Legacy of Goku 1 was bad? Well, they made a sequel to it, and literally improved absolutely everything about it. The graphics are better. The music is straight from the show, meaning it's better. The gameplay is more fun. There's more characters to control. And the combat doesn't feel so damn bad. It's not a horrible mess where you just have to run away and shoot a energy attack, run away and shoot an energy attack. You can actually go and be right in the enemy's face. Now, the combat doesn't feel as fun as, say, some of the fighting games, but I think it did really well for a Zelda-like game. It's pretty darn fun to play, but best of all, in my opinion, is a lot of the dialogue in the game is exactly word for word from the show.
So you must be Frieza. I've been waiting a long time to meet you face to face. Now I'm going to destroy you.
Ooh, we better run. Isn't that right, Father?
So, some of your favorite lines from the show will definitely be in here. And the game takes place from right at the beginning of the Future Trunks movie, where Future Trunks is being raised by Future Gohan, the one who gets his arm blown off, and all the way until the end of the Cell Saga. And you get to play as several different characters in this. Now, the game has a sequel called Boo's Fury, and that game is pretty damn good as well. But I find that the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z is the best saga, and this game is just that. So I give it to the Legacy of Goku number 2. Really, this is a darn solid game. It's very good. If you like Zelda style, the old Zelda style gameplay, you're going to be right at home with this one. I barely have a complaint at all. I can't even think of what that is. I'm sure there's something, but it's very solid. Moving right along, we've got Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. I just want to specify that I'm talking about the PS2 version and not the HD remake. The HD remake looks good, but it's also censored. And it has the changed music. I prefer the original music. So I'll be talking about the PS2 version. This game is finally where the Budokai series took off. The games became finally really good, starting with this. It doesn't tell the story well, and that's the only negative side it has. Really, the music is amazing. Of course, we know now that it was a lot of illegal copywriting and stolen music. But he at least stole from some really good places. It sounds amazing, and you're gonna love all the music. I haven't met anyone who said they disliked the music in the Budokai series, and number 3 is no exception. Also, they improved the graphics drastically over the second game, and all the characters look great. They look just like the show. They're blocky because of PS2 limitations, but other than that, they look amazing. And the game plays way better than the first two. You can now dodge all the time, which looks more like the show. You can teleport behind people, which is pretty cool, and looks like the show. There's Dragon Rush, which also looks like the show. Overall, the whole game looks and feels and plays much more like watching an episode of the show, and much less like some weird original fighting game that they made that was kind of not so great. They really took off with this one. Super attacks can destroy the planet, and you can see them from outer space. All of the sound clips are really good in the whole game. There's good voice acting from the show. What more to be said about this game? There's even a few different things you can do. It tells the whole story of the entire show, even if it is just with the characters having an artwork just stand perfectly still and do nothing. At least it has a story mode, I guess. But really, this is one of the best of the best. What's going to be better than this one? Now, before we get into the best one, let me give you an honorable mention, which is Dragon Ball Xenoverse number 2. I'm not the biggest fan of the first Xenoverse game, and I've heard that this game, Xenoverse 2, is basically just a expansion pack, a DLC, essentially, to the first game. But I've also seen that it covers a lot of content from the movies, and it has a lot of stuff like Ultra Instinct Goku, and is getting updates pretty regularly, and overall it looks pretty decent. I haven't actually played it, but it at least looks like it's pretty good and it has decent graphics. Comment below if I made a huge mistake and Xenoverse is actually the best Dragon Ball Z game of all time, or if it should have been in my bad Dragon Ball Z games. And now for the game no one is going to be surprised about. My number one favorite is Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3. What can even be said about this game? It is just, it really is the best Dragon Ball Z game. The first thing is it has every character. I can't even think of a character that wasn't in this game. It has everyone. Sometimes it has too many characters, such as Frieza Henchman. I don't know who would want to play as that guy. But point is, it's got everybody. You know, the Smash Brothers, everyone is here. Well, this game had everyone is here first. Also, in Tenkaichi 1, I mentioned that the models of the characters looked bad. I find that this one has some improvements on the character models that makes them not look as bad. They don't look perfect. They're still obviously limited to the PS2, but they look pretty good anyways. The gameplay is extremely fun. It's just as fast and furious as you can imagine a Dragon Ball Z episode, and there's lots of stuff to do. There's flying and punching, kicking, teleporting, supers, ultimates, power-up, transformation, deflecting attacks, all kinds of really fun stuff. And what's great is there's this little number that increases as the battle goes on, and you can use special powers as the battle lasts longer. So, the longer a battle is, the more crazy intense things will be happening, making it even more fun as it goes. Well, you can't ask for anything better than that. The music is decent. Obviously, the voice acting is great. It tells the story. It does skip around a little bit in the story. I'm not going to say that this is a perfect game. I just wish that they would remake this game with really modern graphics and tell the story better. Then we would have the best Dragon Ball Z game ever. But until then, this is my favorite Dragon Ball Z game and is damn near perfect. It's just great. If you haven't played this and you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z, I don't know what you're doing. Go out and find a way to play this. It's on PS2 and Wii, and on the Wii you can play it with a classic controller. You don't have to worry about motion controls. Looking at you, Dragon Ball Connect. Truly, it's great.